The tickets were the most exclusive in the world. Paris Fashion Week, front row. He sat there, arm draped possessively around his new lover, a stunning model half his age. He was Marcus Thorne, a man who had everything. He'd even secured an invitation to the debut show of Aura, the mysterious, white-hot brand taking the industry by storm. As he smirked for the cameras, he sent a text to his pregnant wife back home. "Hope you're resting." He had no idea that the woman he was humiliating, the woman carrying his child, was the secret billionaire owner of the very brand he was there to see. The penthouse on Park Avenue was a masterpiece of cold, minimalist design. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of Manhattan, but the sheets of glass felt more like the walls of an expensive aquarium. Inside, Serafina van der Meer felt like its most prized and most trapped specimen. At 6 months pregnant, the nausea had finally subsided, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion that had little to do with the baby and everything to do with the man sleeping beside her. Marcus Thorne was, by all accounts, a success. He was handsome, ruthless in business, and had married into one of New York's oldest fortunes. He managed Serafina's vast inheritance, the real estate, the stocks, the portfolios left by her reclusive father. He managed it well, but he also managed her. "You really should take it easy, darling," he'd murmured that morning, buttoning his custom-made Turnbull and Asser shirt. His reflection in the antique mirror was perfect, not a single dark hair out of place. "This hobby of yours, it's putting stress on the baby, all that fabric and thread." Serafina's hobby was Aura. When her father died, he had left her a sprawling, dysfunctional conglomerate. Buried deep within it was a defunct, dusty Parisian couture house named Aura, which hadn't produced a collection since the 1980s. Marcus had advised her to liquidate it. "Sell the name to a perfume company, sweetheart. It's dead weight." Instead, Serafina, who had a quiet degree in design from Parsons that Marcus found quaint, had poured her own money into it secretly. For 3 years, she had rebuilt it from the ground up. She operated entirely through a proxy, her loyal executive director, Arthur. To the burgeoning fashion world, the creative genius behind Aura was known only by the enigmatic moniker SV. The brand had become a sensation precisely because of its mystery. It didn't use influencers. It didn't advertise. It simply produced breathtaking, architectural garments that were instantly bought by the very few who could get an appointment. And now, SV was finally ready to show the world what Aura truly was. At Paris Fashion Week. Marcus, of course, knew nothing. He saw her late nights hunched over a sketchpad in her private study as nesting. He saw the endless deliveries of fabric swatches and hardware as frivolous spending. He was a man who only understood balance sheets, and Aura was not on any balance sheet he managed. That evening, he came home carrying a sleek, black carbon fiber suitcase. Not his usual leather weekender. "Change of plans, darling," he said, kissing the air beside her cheek. He smelled faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers. Jardin de Sicile. Chloe's signature scent. Serafina's hand rested on the swell of her stomach. "Oh? I thought you had the fundraiser in Chicago." "Postponed. Something massive has come up with the Hong Kong acquisition. I have to fly to Paris. Tonight. I'll be gone through the weekend. Probably all of next week, to be honest. It's a nightmare." Paris. The timing was almost laughable. Serafina kept her expression perfectly placid, a skill she had perfected over 5 years of marriage. "Paris? How dreadful for you. All that business." "Exactly. You know I'd rather be here with you." He patted her stomach, a proprietary gesture that made her skin crawl. You and the little man. He always called the baby the little man, though they hadn't found out the gender. He wanted an heir, a successor for the Thorn name. Well, try to get some rest, she said, her voice smooth as silk. I'll have Maria pack for you. Already done, he said, tapping the high-tech suitcase. I'll be staying at the George 5. Don't call unless it's an emergency. You know how these negotiations are. I know, Serafina said. She knew. She knew Chloe Sanders, an ambitious, leggy influencer with 10 million followers and zero morals, had been posting from the George V for 2 days. She knew Marcus's Hong Kong acquisition was a 24-year-old who saw him as a stepping stone to a modeling contract. And she knew that her own flight, a private Gulfstream GZ50, was leaving from Teterboro in 3 hours, bound for Le Bourget. Marcus was going to Paris for Fashion Week. He just didn't know he was going to her show. You'll be all right here alone? He asked, a final, fleeting glance of obligatory concern. I'll be fine, Marcus. I have my work to keep me busy. He chuckled, a short, condescending sound. Don't tire yourself out with those little sketches, Serafina. Just rest. For me. He left. The heavy penthouse door clicked shut with the sound of a vault ceiling. Serafina stood motionless for a full minute, the skyline's indifferent lights glittering in her eyes. Then she walked to her study, picked up the phone, and dialed her driver. Thomas, bring the car around. It's time to go to the airport. The Aura Atelier was not in a glamorous part of Paris. It was tucked away in the 10th arrondissement, hidden behind a massive, unassuming grey door, the kind you would walk past without a second glance. But behind that door was the nerve centre of the most talked-about brand in the world. While Marcus and Chloe were likely ordering champagne from room service, Serafina, under the name SV, was standing in a cavern of white light, fabric bolts, and controlled chaos. She had traded her Park Avenue loungewear for a simple black maternity dress and comfortable custom-made flats. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her face, free of makeup, was alive with an intensity Marcus had never seen. No, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. She was looking at the Look 9 model. The dress was a column of midnight blue silk, but it was buckling slightly at the hip. The tailoring is lazy. The seam isn't biased. Arthur, who approved this? Arthur Finch, her director, a man with the weary eyes of a saint and the sharp suit of a surgeon, winced. Antoine, madame, he said it was structurally sound. Structurally sound isn't the point. It's weak. It disrupts the line. Tell him to take it apart and redrape it. Now, she turned to another model, who was encased in a jacket made of thousands of hand-sewn, iridescent black pearls. This is the heart of the collection, the resilience piece. It must be perfect. The collection was titled Chrysalis. It was her story. It moved from restrictive, almost armor-like pieces in dark, heavy wools and leathers to gradually lighter, more ethereal creations. The finale was a single dress of liquid gold silk designed to look like a butterfly's wing emerging. For 3 years, SV had been a ghost. The press loved it. Vogue had run a full-page editorial asking, "Who is SV? Fashion's new Garbo." Women's Wear Daily, WWD, speculated it was a famous male designer from a rival house, moonlighting. No one ever suspected Serafina Vandermeer, the mild-mannered American heiress, known only for her charitable donations to the Met. This show was her coming out. And, as fate would have it would be her husband's as well. "Madame," Arthur said, approaching her carefully. He was the only person in the world, besides her lawyer, who knew her full story. "The front row requests are..." challenging. Let me guess. Beatrice Holloway wants the entire A block for her Vogue team. Worse. She's threatening to send her junior editor if she can't sit next to the empty SV chair. Fine, Serafina said, not looking up from a shoe buckle. Put her there. She loves a gimmick. What else? Arthur cleared his throat, a nervous habit. We received a request this afternoon from a Mr. Marcus Thorne. He's requesting 2 front-row seats. He's insistent. He says he's a significant private investor in the luxury market. Serafina froze. The heavy gold buckle in her hand suddenly felt like a block of ice. She had anticipated this. She had even, in a dark, twisted way, hoped for it. But the audacity of it still stole her breath. He wasn't just bringing his mistress to Paris. He was trying to leverage his status, a status she gave him, to get into her show. A significant investor, Serafina repeated, her voice dangerously soft. Is he now? He name-dropped his connection at LVMH. It's a legitimate connection, madame. To refuse him, front row, might create friction. Serafina looked up, and for the first time, Arthur saw the exhaustion of her pregnancy warring with the fire of her anger. Friction, she said. Yes, I'm sure it would. She thought for a moment. Her first instinct was to bar him from the building, to have security throw him out onto the cobblestones. But where was the justice in that? He would just retreat, spin a story, and call her hysterical. No, the cage she had been living in wasn't built of glass. It was built of his assumptions. The only way out was to let him walk in, lock the door himself, and watch him realize he was the one who was trapped. Arthur, she said, her voice now clear and cold as a diamond. Madame? Give Mr. Thorne his seats. Give him excellent seats. Front row. Center. Directly opposite the main camera run. Arthur's eyes widened. Madame Serafina, are you sure? The press, I want him to have a perfect view, she interrupted. I want him to see every single stitch, and I want you to place an extra security detail, plain-clothed, near his position. For your protection? Serafina finally allowed herself a small, grim smile. No, Arthur. For his. When the truth comes out, I don't want him to faint and crack his skull on the runway. It would be a nightmare for an intern to clean up. She turned back to the resilience jacket. Now, let's get back to work. We have a show to finish. The suite at the Hotel Plaza Athénée was a symphony of cream, gold, and obnoxious floral displays. Marcus Thorne had chosen it specifically for the balcony view of the Eiffel Tower. It was a cliché, but Chloe loved clichés. She was currently posing on that balcony, pouting for a selfie. She was wearing a red dress so tight it looked painted on, and nothing else. Marcus, baby, she called, not looking away from her phone screen. This lighting is insane. Are you sure the tickets are good? I don't want to be in the second row. Jessica Dane got second row at the Chanel show, and she was mortified. Marcus, loosening his tie, felt a flash of annoyance. Chloe was beautiful, an undeniably perfect accessory, but she was also incredibly demanding. Still, she was his ticket to a different kind of world, the young, fast, social media-driven world that he, with his old money wife, couldn't access. They are not just good, Chloe, he said, pouring himself a generous measure of cognac. They are A-list, front row, aura, the hottest ticket of the week. No one knows who the designer is. It's all anyone is talking about. Aura, Chloe mused, finally coming inside. I love their bags, but they won't even sell me one. They said I wasn't on the list. Can you believe it? Everyone is on a list, darling, Marcus said, pulling her onto his lap. You just have to know the list maker. I made a call to a friend at Kering. pulled a few strings. They were practically begging me to come. They know I'm a serious player." You're the most serious player I know," she whispered, kissing him. He tasted the cognac and the faint, artificial cherry of her lip gloss. He felt a pang of, not guilt, but inconvenience. He thought of Serafina. She was probably sitting in that cold, silent apartment, drinking some herbal tea and reading a book. She was a good wife, in the classical sense, placid, predictable, wealthy. But she was boring. She had no fire, no ambition. She was content to be a vessel for his heir and a custodian for her father's dusty money. This, here with Chloe, this was living. This was the sharp end of the spear. "What are you going to wear?" he asked. "This," Chloe said, gesturing to her red dress. Marcus frowned. "No, not to the Aura show. SV is elevated, architectural. That dress is for a nightclub. I had something sent up." He pointed to a garment bag hanging on the wardrobe. Inside was a sleek, minimalist black dress from the row. It was expensive, understated, and, in Chloe's opinion, a total bore. "It's so plain," she whined. "It's class, Chloe. You're not an influencer tonight. You're my partner. You're sitting next to me. You have to look the part." He was building a new brand for himself. Marcus Thorne, the power broker, the man who moved between old-world finance and new-world cool. Flaunting his mistress at the Aura show wasn't just an act of infidelity. It was a business decision. It was a statement. I am not my boring wife. I am the future. He picked up his phone and, feeling a sudden, magnanimous impulse, sent a text to Serafina. "Paris is a madhouse. All work. Hope you're resting, darling. Thinking of you." He hit send and tossed the phone on the bed. "Now," he said to Chloe, "put on the black dress. We have dinner reservations at L'Ambroisie, and tomorrow we show them all how it's done." Across the city, Serafina's phone vibrated on a cluttered workbench. She glanced at the screen. "Paris is a madhouse. All work. Hope you're resting, darling. Thinking of you." She looked at the text, then at the 40-foot-long mood board for her collection. She looked at the weary, hopeful faces of her 50-person team, all of whom were running on caffeine and adrenaline. She looked at the final, breathtaking chrysalis dress, now waiting on its mannequin. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel sadness. She felt a profound, cold clarity. He wasn't just lying to her. He was lying to himself. He had built an entire world based on the assumption of her weakness. She put her phone on silent and turned to her head of PR. "Clear the backstage area for one interview post-show," she ordered. "Beatrice Holloway, Vogue, no one else. And make sure the cameras in the venue have a clear, tight shot of the front row, center block." "The front row?" the PR head asked, confused. "But the show is on the runway." "The runway is the main event," Serafina said, placing a hand on her pregnant stomach, feeling the baby kick. "But the reaction is the story." The Grand Palais Éphémère was electric. The temporary structure, set up near the Eiffel Tower, was thrumming with the high-pitched, frantic energy that only a major fashion show can generate. Outside, a sea of photographers' flashes created a perpetual, strobing daylight as celebrities, editors, and billionaires navigated the cobblestones. This was the circus, and Marcus Thorne felt he was finally its ringmaster. He stepped out of the black Mercedes sedan, adjusting the lapels of his Tom Ford suit. Chloe, beside him, looked striking in the black dress, which she had complained about until the moment the first photographer screamed her name. Now, she was a vision of manufactured elegance, her hand tucked possessively in Marcus's arm. "Marcus! Chloe!" the paparazzi yelled. Marcus gave a reserved, powerful nod. Chloe blew a kiss. They were the new power couple. He could feel it. The air crackled with their arrival. Inside, the show space was a stark, cavernous white box. A single polished black runway snaked through the center. The guests were a who's who of the global elite. Marcus recognized a chart-topping pop star, a few Hollywood A-listers, and most importantly, the entire editorial staff of Vogue Paris, Vogue US, and Vogue UK. And there, sitting in the A block, with an expression of intense boredom, was Beatrice Holloway herself, the silver-haired lioness of the industry, the woman whose opinion could make or break a $100 million brand overnight. An usher, seeing their gold-embossed invitations, quickly led them to their seats. Monsieur Thorne, Mademoiselle Sanders, welcome. Their seats were, as promised, perfect. Front row, dead center. They were sitting directly across from Beatrice Holloway. Marcus caught her eye and gave a slight dip of his chin. She offered a brief, clinical assessment of him and Chloe before turning back to her phone. It didn't matter. He was in her eye line. He was here. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, her phone already out and recording. "That's Amelia Weston. She never goes to shows. And look, the Minister of Culture." Marcus felt a swell of pride. This was his world. He had crashed the gates. He looked at Chloe, at her flawless profile, her hungry eyes. She was a perfect reflection of his own ambition. He thought, briefly, of Serafina, 6 months pregnant and probably asleep in New York. He felt a small, fleeting prick of pity. She was a good woman, but she would never understand this. She didn't have the hunger for it. Her world was small and soft. This world was hard, bright, and sharp, and it was his. He leaned in close to Chloe, the flashbulbs still popping around them. "See, darling," he whispered into her ear. "I told you. The best of everything. From now on, this is our life." Chloe beamed, seeing her future unfolding. Marcus settled into his seat, crossed his legs, and prepared to be entertained. He was so focused on the spectacle of the crowd, on the celebrity spotting and the networking, that he barely glanced at the show notes placed on his seat. It was a simple, elegant card, embossed with a single, unfamiliar logo, a stylized A that looked almost like a butterfly's wing. Below it, a single line. Aura. Collection. 1. Chrysalis by SV. He had no idea that SV was the name his wife used at her design school, a simple monogram of her maiden name, Serafina Vandermeer. He just thought it was a cool, anonymous brand. The lights began to dim. A hush fell over the massive room. Marcus put his arm around Chloe's chair, the picture of casual power. He was ready for the show to begin. The room plunged into absolute darkness. For a moment, the only sound was the collective anticipatory intake of breath from 800 people. Then, a single piercing violin note cut through the silence. A beam of white light hit the top of the runway. The first model emerged. She was encased in a dress of dark slate-grey wool, structured so rigidly it was almost armor. The shoulders were sharp, the waist unnaturally constricted. It was beautiful, but it was brutal. As she walked, the sound of her heels was like a metronome, a countdown. More models followed. The first part of the Chrysalis collection was about constraint. Dresses that looked like cages, jackets with heavy, restrictive buckles, colors of charcoal, obsidian, and deep, bruised purple. The tailoring was exquisite, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Even he, a man who appreciated suits but not fashion, could see the genius in the construction. "It's so dark," Chloe whispered, her phone filming every second. "It's powerful," Beatrice Holloway said from across the runway, her voice carrying in the quiet. Then the music shifted. The violin was joined by a cello, and the tone began to swell. The clothes started to change. The dark wools gave way to shattered silks. A dress appeared that looked like a fractured mirror, its pieces held together by delicate gold thread. The colors began to lift. First, flashes of silver, then pale blues, then a blush of dawn pink. The silhouette softened. The models who had walked with a grim, robotic pace now moved with more fluidity. Serafina, watching from a monitor backstage, felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Her hand was pressed to her stomach. The baby was kicking, as if it too could feel the music. "They're with you," Arthur whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. "You have them." On the runway, the final transformation was beginning. The music swelled to a full orchestral crescendo. The final sequence of models emerged in a blaze of light. The clothes were ethereal, triumphant. They were made of liquid lame, airy tools, and intricate, hand-beaded fabrics that looked like butterfly wings. The final model, the resilience piece Serafina had obsessed over, wore the jacket of 1,000 black pearls, but she wore it open, revealing a simple, perfect white silk slip beneath. She was no longer armored. She was free. The crowd was stunned into silence before erupting into spontaneous applause. Even Beatrice Holloway was nodding, a rare, impressed smile on her face. Marcus was clapping too. He was genuinely impressed. "Incredible," he said to Chloe. "We are definitely investing. I'll find out who this SV art is. We'll get a meeting. This is $1 billion brand. $1 billion." Chloe was just staring, mesmerized. "That gold one. I need that gold one." The final model stopped at the end of the runway. The lights changed, softening to a warm glow. The music faded, replaced by the sound of a single, steady heartbeat. An announcer's voice, rich and feminine, echoed through the Grand Palais. "Thank you for joining us for the debut of Chrysalis." The crowd cheered. "And now, for the first time, putting a face to the name." The entire room held its breath. Marcus leaned forward, eager to see the genius, the man he was going to make his new business partner. The founder, the creative director, and the sole visionary behind Aura, Serafina van der Meer. The name hung in the air for a fraction of a second. Serafina van der Meer. To 99% of the room, the name was a shock. Van der Meer, the quiet American heiress, the one married to that finance guy? To Marcus Thorne, the name was not a shock. It was an impossibility, a sonic boom that deafened him. His smile froze, then cracked. He physically recoiled, as if struck. "What?" he breathed. "What did she say?" Chloe turned to him, her face a mask of confusion. "Serafina, like, you're Serafina." And then she walked out. From the dark mouth of the backstage entrance, Serafina emerged into the warm, brilliant light. She was not the woman Marcus had left in New York. This was not the quiet, placid wife in her cashmere lounge set. This woman was a queen. She was wearing a sharply tailored, custom-made maternity pantsuit in a stunning, brilliant white. Her hair, which she usually wore down, was slicked back, emphasizing her high cheekbones and the fierce, intelligent light in her eyes. Her 6-month pregnancy was not something to be hidden. It was the centerpiece of her silhouette, a statement of power, of creation. She looked radiant. She looked terrifying. She looked, Marcus realized with a sickening lurch, completely and utterly unknown to him. The room exploded. The applause was deafening. The flashes from the photographers were blinding, a solid wall of white light. Beatrice Holloway was on her feet, leading a standing ovation. Serafina walked slowly, gracefully, down the long, black runway. She passed the models, who were lined up, smiling and applauding their creator. Marcus couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. His entire reality was collapsing in on itself, crushing him. His wife, his boring, passive, hobbyist wife, was SV the dusty couture house he'd told her to sell, the sketches he'd condescended to, the late nights he'd assumed were pregnancy nerves. It was all this empire. He looked at the Aura logo on the screen, then at his wife's powerful figure, then at the fawning, adoring crowd. He was a fool. He was the biggest, most colossal fool in the history of Paris. Serafina reached the end of the runway. She paused, took a deep breath, and smiled. A genuine, luminous smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. And then her eyes scanned the front row. She passed over the celebrities, over the fawning editors, until her gaze found his. She locked eyes with Marcus. There was no sadness in her look. No, how could you? There was no anger, no pain. It was something far worse. It was a look of cold, final, indifferent assessment. It was the look a CEO gives a redundancy, a line item to be deleted. In that single devastating glance, he saw his entire future evaporate. Beside him, Chloe was hyperventilating. She was looking at Serafina, the billionaire creative genius, then at Marcus, the cheating husband who was now a complete and total liability. The blood drained from her face. She wasn't just losing her in to the fashion world. She was sitting next to the man who had just publicly humiliated its new queen. She was toxic. She was done. She slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to edge her chair away from his. Serafina held his gaze for 3 long, agonizing seconds. Then she turned, bowed to Beatrice Holloway, and walked calmly back up the runway, disappearing backstage as the applause reached a fever pitch. Marcus was left in the front row, a statue of ash in a Tom Ford suit, the blinding flashes of the cameras still going off in his face. But they weren't for him. Not anymore. The applause was a physical wall of sound, a tidal wave that seemed to pin Marcus Thorne to his seat. It was a roar of adulation, not just for a collection, but for a coronation. And he, in his front row seat, was the jester at the feast, the sacrificial lamb. He finally, mechanically, got to his feet. His legs felt like lead, his blood replaced with ice. The crowd was a blur of standing, cheering faces, all directed at the dark opening backstage where she had disappeared. "Serafina!" he yelled, his voice sounding thin and pathetic, lost in the din. "Serafina!" He began to push, shoving his way past a bewildered starlet and a stony-faced fashion critic. "I need to see my wife," he said, the words sounding insane even to his own ears. "She's my wife." He reached the backstage entrance just as 2 massive, black-suited security guards stepped forward, linking their arms. "Sir, this area is private," one said, his voice a bored, professional monotone. "She's my wife!" Marcus roared, his composure shattering completely. He was a wild animal, cornered and terrified. "Let me through. She's pregnant. She's hysterical. She doesn't know what she's doing." "On the contrary, Mr. Thorne." Marcus froze. Arthur Finch, Serafina's hobby director, stepped out from behind the guards. The weary, deferential man Marcus had occasionally seen delivering swatches to the penthouse was gone. In his place was a man of absolute, cold authority, his suit sharper than any of Marcus's. "Arthur, thank God!" Marcus gasped, lunging for him. "Tell these gorillas to let me pass. This is a misunderstanding. She's overwrought. The pregnancy—" "I have never seen her more lucid," Arthur said, his voice slicing through Marcus's panic. He held up a hand, not to console, but to stop. "Mrs. Vandermeer is not seeing you, Mr. Thorne. Not now. Not ever. You can't do this. We can, and we have. Arthur's eyes were as indifferent as Seraphina's had been on the runway. Mrs. Vandermeer's instructions were very specific. You are not to approach her, her staff, or her properties. Her properties? Her properties? I manage her properties. I built this. Whatever this dressmaking nonsense is, I funded it with my... You funded nothing, Arthur said, the contempt in his voice a fresh slap. Aura was rebuilt using Mrs. Vandermeer's private, premarital assets, routed through a blind trust in Delaware. A trust you, her brilliant financial manager, never once thought to investigate. You saw her hobby and dismissed it. You saw her, and you dismissed her. Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single, heavy card. This is the name and number of Mr. Robert Davies from the law firm of Paul, Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton and Garrison. He is Mrs. Vandermeer's sole legal representative. All further communication will go through him. One of the security guards placed a heavy, immovable hand on Marcus's chest. Please leave the premises, sir. Now. You can't, Marcus stammered, looking at the card. It was a declaration of war. A war he had already lost. He was physically turned and pushed, stumbling back out into the main hall, which was now emptying. The cold Parisian air hit him as he was ejected from a side door, spitting him out onto the cobblestone street. The circus was over. The last of the black cars were pulling away. He looked around, dazed, his adrenaline replaced by a hollow, sickening dread. Then he saw her. Chloe Sanders was frantically trying to hail a cab, her face hidden behind a curtain of blonde hair. She had her phone pressed to her ear, likely leaving a panicked voicemail for her agent. "Chloe!" he called, running toward her. "Chloe, wait! Get in the car!" He looked for the Mercedes he had arrived in. The driver was there, but the door was locked. The driver simply stared at him, shook his head, and put the car in gear, pulling away from the curb. "Marcus?" Chloe spun around, and her face wasn't angry. It was white with pure, undiluted terror. "Chloe, listen to me. Stay away from me!" she shrieked, her voice high and ragged. She physically recoiled, as if he were diseased. "Oh my God, stay away! Do you know what you've done? Do you know what she's done? It's a mistake. I can fix this." "Fix this? Fix this?" She laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "Marcus, I'm toxic. I'm the girl who sat next to the dumbest man in Paris, while his billionaire wife humiliated him in front of Beatrice Holloway. My career is over. I'm a joke. You've ruined me." A taxi finally swerved to a stop. Chloe yanked the door open and threw herself inside. Marcus reached for the handle. "Chloe, just listen." "Go to hell, Marcus," she screamed, and she slammed the door on his fingers. He cried out, pulling them back as the taxi sped off, leaving him utterly, completely alone on the dark street. The faint cheers from inside the venue, the final, mocking soundtrack to his ruin. Inside, the atmosphere was euphoric. The moment Seraphina stepped off the runway, her team engulfed her. There were tears, cheers, and the pop of multiple champagne corks. Her head seamstress, a woman in her 60s named Elodie, simply grabbed Seraphina's hands and kissed them. "Magnifique, madame. C'est un triomphe." Seraphina smiled, a genuine, weary smile. She felt the baby kick, a small, affirmative nudge. "We did it, Elodie. We did it." Arthur appeared at her side, a glass of water in hand. "He's gone." Security escorted him out. "He didn't take it well." "He was never going to," Seraphina said, taking a sip. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep clarity. "Arthur, it's time." Arthur nodded, his expression somber but resolved. "I'll make the call." Call Mr. Davies. Tell him the chrysalis has officially emerged. He knows what that means. File the papers. Freeze the accounts. Change the locks. Everything. Today. Yes, madame. And the interview? Serafina asked. Ms. Holloway is waiting in the private lounge. Are you sure you're up for this? I've never been more ready, Serafina said. She placed a hand on her stomach. It's time to tell our story. She walked into the quiet, cream-colored lounge. Beatrice Holloway, the silver-haired lioness of the industry, was standing by the window. She turned, her famously severe face broken by a look of profound respect. Serafina, Beatrice said, her voice rich with approval. I must confess, in 40 years of covering this industry, I have never been so completely and so wonderfully surprised. You played us all. I never played, Beatrice, Serafina said, sitting down. She gestured for Beatrice to join her. I just stopped letting other people play me. Beatrice clicked on her recorder. Let's talk about the collection. Chrysalis. It's a rather on-the-nose title now, wouldn't you say? Serafina smiled, a calm, knowing smile. It's a story of transformation, of emerging from a place of confinement. The early pieces, the armor, the constrictions. That was my life. I was bound by assumptions, that I was just an heiress, that I was just a wife, that my work was, she said, her voice hardening slightly, a hobby. And the man in the front row? Beatrice asked, her question gentle but precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Your husband, Marcus Thorne. He seemed surprised. Marcus is an excellent financial manager, Serafina said, her voice perfectly even. He's very good with numbers he can see on a spreadsheet. He overlooked this particular asset. He advised me to liquidate Iora 3 years ago. He called it dead weight. He saw no value in it. And his guest, Beatrice prompted. I suppose he was simply networking, Serafina said, the dismissal as clean as a guillotine. He's always been an ambitious man. Unfortunately, his ambition often blinded him to the assets he already controlled. The story broke while Marcus was still in a taxi to Charles de Gaulle, frantically trying to call his office. The Vogue interview went live, and the internet exploded. WWWD's headline was Savage. SV is Serafina van der Meer. Heiress reveals billion-dollar brand and husband's betrayal in one move. The New York Post was, as ever, more succinct. Front row fool. Marcus Thorne's descent was as swift as it was brutal. At the Air France lounge, his American Express Centurion card, the black card that was his entire identity, was declined. Impossible, he snapped at the attendant. Run it again. She did. I'm sorry, monsieur. It is rejected. He tried his platinum card. Declined. His Chase Sapphire Reserve. Declined. His corporate debit card. Insufficient funds. The cold sweat of full-blown panic began to bead on his forehead. He scraped together just enough on a minor, forgotten credit card to book a one-way ticket to New York. Not in first class. Not even in business. He was in seat 34B, a middle seat in coach on a Norse Atlantic flight, wedged between a 300-pound salesman who snored like a dying engine and a young mother with a colicky infant who screamed for 9 solid hours. He tried the in-flight Wi-Fi, paying the $29.99 fee with the last dregs of his credit. His email inbox was a war zone. From Legal Debt, Thorne van der Meer Interests. Subject, Notice of Termination. Dear Mr. Thorne, your services as portfolio manager are terminated, effective immediately. From Morgan Stanley Private Wealth. Subject, Account suspension, urgent, pending review of legal action filed in the state of New York. All joint accounts have been frozen. From the Board of the Met. Subject, Resignation request. In light of the public scandal, we request you tender your resignation. He scrolled, his hands shaking. Dozens more. From clubs, from charities, from boards. He was being excised from his own life like a tumor. He tried to call his lawyer, but the call wouldn't go through. He tried to text Chloe. The message failed to send. User not found. She had blocked him. The final humiliation came from the passenger in 34A. She was scrolling through her phone, and he saw the headline on the Daily Mail website, complete with a split-screen image. On one side, Serafina, radiant on the runway, and on the other, his own face, slack-jawed in shock, with Chloe beside him, looking horrified. The headline screamed, "He picked the wrong fashion show!" Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. The shame was a physical weight, crushing him into the cheap, stained upholstery. He wasn't a master of the universe. He was a middle-seat passenger, and the baby next to him had just spit up on his Tom Ford suit. He landed at JFK, feeling like a ghost. The air smelled of stale coffee and defeat. He walked to the black car service pickup area. No driver held a "Thorn" sign. He called the service. "I'm sorry, sir," the dispatcher said. "The account associated with that name has been permanently suspended for non-payment." He took a yellow cab, the meters ticking a countdown to his next failure. The cab pulled up to the familiar, opulent, limestone-clad building on Park Avenue. He stumbled out, his rumpled suit reeking of the flight. Miguel, the doorman he'd known for 5 years, stepped in front of the ornate bronze door, his face a mask of professional regret. "Mr. Thorne, I'm sorry, sir." "Miguel, open the door. I live here." "Sir, my instructions are explicit." Miguel would not meet his eye. "From Mrs. Vandermeer's legal team, you are not to be granted access to the building." "What are you talking about? My clothes, my files, my life is in that apartment." "A representative from Mr. Davies's office is here, sir." A thin, nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit stepped out from the lobby, holding a single small briefcase. It was the black carbon fiber suitcase Marcus had packed for Paris. "Mr. Thorne," the man said, his voice reedy. "All items deemed your non-marital personal property, purchased prior to your union, have been gathered. They are in this case. A temporary residence has been arranged for you at an extended-stay hotel in Midtown. All expenses will, of course, be billed to you. My clothes, my watches, my art." Marcus was breathing in short, sharp gasps. "Are considered marital assets, currently frozen and under review by our forensic accounting team," the man recited, as if reading from a script. "Good day, Mr. Thorne." The man handed him the suitcase, the one he'd packed for his tryst, and retreated inside. Miguel, with a final, pitying look, closed the heavy bronze door. The click of the lock echoed in the street. Marcus Thorne stood on the sidewalk of Park Avenue, locked out of his own life, holding an empty bag. 6 months later, the New York skyline had a new addition. The Aura Tower, a sleek 80-story spire of glass and steel in Hudson Yards, was the new global headquarters for the fastest-growing luxury brand in history. The Chrysalis collection had not just sold out, it had created a 20,000-person wait list and netted over $300 million in pre-orders alone. Aura was valued, conservatively, at $5 billion. Serafina Vandermeer's new office was on the top floor. Unlike the cold penthouse, this space was warm, filled with light, raw wood, and sketches for the next collection. The walls were covered not with art, but with fabric swatches and architectural blueprints. And on her desk, the covers of Forbes, the $5 billion hobby, Fortune, Aura's architect, and of course Vogue, the new empress, were framed. Serafina, however, was not sketching. She sat at the head of a 40-foot-long marble boardroom table, surrounded by her executive team. "The offer from Caring is $5.2 billion for a 20% stake," a lawyer, one of Mr. Davies's partners, was saying. "It's an extremely strong, good faith offer, Serafina. It would give us unparalleled global distribution." Serafina looked at the numbers, her expression calm. "No." The room went silent. "No?" the lawyer asked. "No," Serafina repeated. "Tell Monsieur Pinault his offer is quaint. We are not looking for a partner. We are looking at acquisitions. I want the Italian textile mill we discussed by Q3, and the leather works in Spain by Q4. Aura will be vertically integrated within 24 months. We will control the supply chain from the sheep to the shop. Am I clear?" The team, after a beat of stunned silence, nodded. "Yes, Madame Vandermeer." "Good. Dismissed." The room cleared, the hard-nosed CEO facade dissolving as the door clicked shut. Serafina walked to a quiet, sunlit corner of her office. There, in a sleek, modern bassinet designed by an emerging artist she'd discovered, her daughter, Aurelia Vandermeer, was stirring. She lifted the baby, who cooed, her tiny hand wrapping around Serafina's finger. "Hello, my love," Serafina whispered, kissing her forehead. "Did you have a good nap? Did you dream of empires?" On a muted television screen in the corner, a financial news ticker scrolled by. "Former financier Marcus Thorne's countersuit dismissed. Judge upholds prenuptial agreement, citing overwhelming evidence of marital fraud." Serafina didn't even see it. She was too busy looking out the floor-to-ceiling window, holding her daughter, overlooking the city that was now, unequivocally, hers. The cage was gone. She was the architect of her own, vast, limitless sky. A year passed, the seasons changed, but the new reality remained fixed. For Marcus Thorne, the world was no longer Park Avenue. It was a third-floor walk-up in Jersey City, with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. The name Thorne, once his key to any door, was now an anchor. He was a pariah. No bank would hire him. No board would have him. The scandal was too public, too deliciously ironic. He was the man who held the lottery ticket and used it to light a cheap cigar. He now went by Mark. He'd sold the last of his non-seized assets, a pair of inherited cufflinks, to buy a bus pass. He'd found a job, eventually, as a night shift auditor for a budget hotel chain, a windowless, soul-crushing job that paid just enough to cover his rent and his ramen. One rainy October evening, he was on the PATH train, huddled in a thin, worn coat, the ghost of his former self. He was invisible, just another tired man heading to a job he hated. He looked up, and his blood ran cold. The woman sitting opposite him, a young, bright-eyed paralegal, was carrying a new handbag. It was an Aura. The chrysalis clutch. The white, buttery soft leather was embossed with the simple, unmistakable A. She was holding it like a religious artifact, her face glowing with pride. Marcus felt a physical, agonizing sickness. His wife's hobby was now the object of desire for an entire generation. He got off at his stop and rushed into the street, the rain cold on his face. A bus swerved past, and the entire side of it was an Aura advertisement. It wasn't just a brand. It was a global phenomenon. He was a footnote in the story of his wife's ascent. Across the river, in a sprawling, light-filled penthouse in Tribeca, one she had designed herself, all warm woods, soft fabrics, and breathtaking river views, Serafina was on the floor. She was not the CEO. She was not SV. She was Mama. Aurelia Vandermeer, now a healthy, bright-eyed toddler, giggled as she stacked a set of wooden blocks, only to knock them over with a delighted squeal. The room was not silent. It was filled with the sound of a child's laughter and the soft melody of a classical piano piece. Arthur arrived, not with contracts, but with a thick, bound portfolio. "The final plans for the Parsons Institute," he said, placing it on the coffee table. "The Serafina Vandermeer Center for Emerging Design. The board approved the endowment. The first round of full scholarships will go to 20 young female designers. We've begun accepting applications." Serafina picked up the portfolio. On the cover, in clean, strong letters, was her name. Not her father's name, not her husband's. Her name. A name she had redefined. It was no longer just a synonym for heiress. It was now a synonym for creator, for visionary, for power. She thought, for a fleeting, indifferent moment, of Marcus. The divorce had been finalized in record time. His desperate, grasping lawsuits had been dismissed by the courts as frivolous. The prenuptial agreement he had so arrogantly signed, believing himself the one in control, had held firm, a fortress wall he could not breach. He was, as her lawyers had put it, fully divested. He was a line item that had been zeroed out. Serafina closed the portfolio, a small, satisfied smile on her face. She looked at her daughter, who was trying to put a block on her mother's head. "A new legacy, Aurelia," she whispered, kissing her daughter's soft hair. "Not one we were given, but one we will build." She had not just escaped the cage. She had melted it down and forged an empire from the very bars that were meant to hold her. And she was just getting started. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for Serafina, it wasn't about revenge. It was about resurrection. By underestimating her, Marcus didn't just lose a wife, he lost an empire. He was so busy looking for the next big thing, he never realized the biggest thing of all was the woman he left at home. Serafina's story is a powerful reminder. Never, ever mistake a woman's silence for weakness. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. What did you think of Marcus's ultimate downfall? Was Serafina's reveal the most epic boss move ever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of drama, betrayal, and ultimate triumph, please show your support by hitting that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another real-life story. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder of their own power. He was a man who had everything: a corner office on the 50th floor, a tailored suit worth more than most cars, and a ruthless ambition that had scorched everyone beneath him. His secretary Clara was just another rung on his ladder, diligent, intelligent, and inconveniently pregnant. When his ambitious mistress, Serafina, wanted Clara gone, he did it without a second thought. He fired her, publicly, humiliatingly. What he didn't know, as he watched her walk away, was that Clara wasn't just his secretary. She was Clara Hayes, the only daughter of the man who owned the entire building, and the reckoning was just beginning. Julian Vance lived his life 50 floors above New York City, and he believed this altitude granted him a kind of divinity. His office at Vanguard Equity Partners wasn't just a room, it was a testament to his arrival. It was a cube of glass, suspended over the city, and from it he viewed the world, and his employees, as tiny, manageable subjects. Julian was a man carved from ambition. At 38, he was the youngest senior vice president in the firm's history, and he wore his success like armor. Bespoke Tom Ford suits, a Patek Philippe watch that chimed on the quarter hour, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. Outside that glass cube sat Clara Hayes. Clara was, in every way, the antithesis of Julian's flash. She was quiet, methodical, and possessed an intelligence that was as deep as it was unobtrusive. For 2 years, she had been the perfect secretary. She anticipated his needs, corrected his mistakes before he made them, and managed his chaotic schedule with an unnerving calm. She was, as Julian often bragged to his peers, a mind reader. But 6 months ago, Clara had become an inconvenience. She was pregnant. Her body, once neatly professional, was now undeniably round. Her presence, once efficient, now seemed to Julian to be a constant, ticking reminder of biological messiness. He loathed it. It wasn't just the impending maternity leave. A scheduling black hole, he'd called it. It was the visual of it. It screamed weakness. It screamed domesticity. It screamed everything Julian had sacrificed to get where he was. "Clara!" he barked through the intercom, not looking up from his terminal. "My 10 a.m. client notes. Now." "They're on your desk, Julian," her calm voice replied instantly. "I placed them there an hour ago. Open to page 3, where you'll find the discrepancies in their Q3 report." Julian glanced down. There they were. He grunted, annoyed at her preemptive competence. His annoyance was being actively stoked by Serafina Croft. Serafina was the firm's new head of strategic marketing, hired 3 months prior. She was fire to Clara's ice, all sharp angles, blood-red lipstick, and a laugh that echoed with undisguised avarice. She and Julian had fallen into a discreet, then flagrant affair almost immediately. Serafina didn't just want Julian's affection, she wanted his power, and she saw Clara as a stubborn obstacle. Serafina sauntered over to Clara's desk, leaning against it hip-first, deliberately crowding Clara's space. She was holding a steaming mug. "Still here, Clara?" Serafina purred, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I'm surprised you can still fit behind that desk. You're blooming." Clara didn't look up from her screen. "I'm fine, Miss Croft. Can I help you with something?" "Oh, just admiring your dedication," Serafina said, taking a sip. "Julian is so kind to let you keep working. Most women in your condition would be at home, nesting or something." A few junior analysts snickered. Clara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Beside her, Mary, the older executive assistant for another partner, shot Serafina a venomous look. Mary liked Clara. She'd seen ambitious sharks like Serafina devour good people for sport. "I'm more effective here, Miss Croft," Clara said evenly. "Are you, though?" Serafina shot back. Julian was just complaining that the Sanderson files were late. "Pregnancy brain, I suppose?" Clara's head snapped up. "The Sanderson files are not due until tomorrow at 5. Julian wanted them today. He must have forgotten to tell you," Serafina said, with a fake pout. "Don't worry, I handled it for him." Clara watched her walk away, a perfectly straight seam running up the back of her designer skirt. Clara looked at her digital scheduler. The Sanderson deadline was, indeed, tomorrow. Serafina was lying. She was building a narrative. This wasn't the first time. For weeks, Serafina had been helpfully pointing out Clara's lapses. A meeting missed that had been rescheduled by Serafina herself. A coffee order that was wrong, though Julian had changed his preference that morning. Small, insidious cuts designed to bleed Clara's reputation dry. And Julian, blinded by Serafina's ambition and his own, was letting it happen. Later that day, Julian had a crisis. A major client, the pension fund for the state of Ohio, was threatening to pull their $800 million portfolio. Their representative was on a conference call, and he was furious. "I'm looking at this proposal, Vance, and it's a joke," the man yelled through the speakerphone. You've miscalculated our exposure by nearly 15%. This is amateur hour." Julian was sweating. He was shuffling papers, his charm failing. "Mr. Henderson, if you'll just let me explain." Clara, listening from her desk, quietly printed a single sheet of paper. She walked into the glass office, ignoring Serafina, who had perched herself on the guest chair, and slid the paper in front of Julian. On it were 3 bullet points. Julian paused. He read them. His posture changed. "Mr. Henderson," Julian said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. "I haven't miscalculated. You're looking at the projections before we factored in the new federal bond acquisitions. If you'll turn to Appendix D, subsection 4A, which my team prepared this morning, you'll see we've actually shielded your exposure. The 15% discrepancy isn't a loss. It's a hedge that's already paying dividends." There was a silence on the line. "Well, why didn't you say so?" "I prefer to let the numbers speak for themselves," Julian said, leaning back. He won the call. The client was pacified. When he hung up, Serafina ran a hand up his arm. "You were brilliant, Julian. You saved us." Julian straightened his tie, his gaze falling on Clara, who was quietly retrieving the paper. "Clara, get the Henderson contingency file updated, and next time, try to keep up." Clara paused at the door, her back to him. "Of course, Julian." She walked out. Julian didn't see the look on her face, but Mary at the next desk did. It wasn't defeat, it wasn't sadness, it was a cold, calculating patience. It was the look of a chess master watching her opponent knowingly walk into a trap. The trap was being set, but not by Clara. It was being set by Julian and Serafina over $300 stakes at the Onyx Room, a restaurant so dark and exclusive it felt like a vault. "She has to go, Julian," Serafina said, swirling a glass of Cabernet. The crimson liquid caught the light from the single candle. "She makes you look soft." Julian loosened his tie, away from the fluorescent lights of the office. His ambition felt purer, more justified. "She's pregnant, Sarah. Firing her is a legal nightmare. The optics are terrible." "Optics?" Serafina laughed, a low, throaty sound. "We're not talking about optics. We're talking about your future, the partnership, the Asia-Pacific expansion. Do you think David Morrison got to be CEO by worrying about optics? He got there by being decisive, by cutting liabilities." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "And she is a liability. She's slow, she's dowdy, and she's watching us. I don't like it." Julian frowned. "She's a secretary. She's not watching anything." "Isn't she?" Serafina countered. "She saved you on that Henderson call. How did she know that? How was she that prepared? It's like she's auditing you. It's creepy, Julian, and frankly, I want her desk. I want to be right outside your office. I can be your partner in this, Julian. Your real partner. But not while she's there, playing Mother Superior." The image she painted was potent. Serafina, in her sharp suits, sitting guard at his door. Serafina, anticipating his real needs. It was an intoxicating thought. The pregnancy had repulsed him, but Serafina was right. Clara's quiet competence was, in its own way, a threat. It felt like judgment. "Fine," Julian said, his voice hardening. "We cut the liability, but it has to be clean. It has to be for cause." "Then we find a cause," Serafina smiled, raising her glass. The cause began the next day. It was a two-pronged attack: manufacture a performance issue and sabotage her reliability. The first step was a file. The North Star acquisition was Julian's flagship project, a $2 billion deal. The final signatory papers were due by courier to London by 10 a.m. Friday. This was a hard deadline. Missing it would incur massive penalties. Clara had the package prepped by Wednesday. She logged it for international courier pickup, triple-checked the customs forms, and placed the bright red, wax-sealed envelope in the secure outgoing mail slot. She sent a confirmation email to Julian. North Star package is secure and logged for 8 a.m. pickup tomorrow, Thursday. It will arrive in London with 24 hours to spare. Julian read the email. Serafina was leaning over his shoulder. "See?" he whispered. "She's on top of it." "It's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Serafina whispered back. She waited until 5:30 p.m., when Clara, moving a little slower than usual, packed her bag and headed for the elevator. Clara was the last to leave their section. Mary, the other assistant, had left hours ago. At 5:35 p.m., Serafina walked calmly to the mailroom. She flirted with the night shift clerk, asked him to find a lost earring near the sorting table. While he was distracted, her hand darted into the international secure slot. She retrieved the bright red envelope. She didn't destroy it. She simply slipped it into her oversized designer handbag. At 7 p.m., she and Julian were in his office. He was pacing. "This is insane, Sarah. This is a felony." "It's a clerical error, Julian," she cooed, placing the envelope on his desk. "Clara's error. She must have forgotten to put it in the slot. Look, here it is, sitting on her desk, buried under a memo. She must have left it this afternoon. How tragic. How forgetful." She then moved to Clara's computer. Clara, trusting, had her password saved in a desktop file for Julian, in case of emergency. This, Serafina decided, was an emergency. She logged into Clara's email. She found the confirmation message sent to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged." Serafina smiled, and with a click of the mouse, she deleted it. Not just from Clara's sent folder, but from the server-side recall. Then, she went into Clara's scheduler and deleted the courier pickup appointment. "There," she said, logging out. "No email, no appointment, just a package sitting on her desk. Missed. A multi-billion-dollar deal, jeopardized by her incompetence. By her pregnancy brain." Julian stared at the package. This was the point of no return. This wasn't just firing someone, it was destroying them. He picked up the package. He opened Clara's desk drawer, the one with her spare sweaters and prenatal vitamins, and dropped the package inside, kicking it to the very back. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. "Good," Serafina said, kissing him hard. "Now tomorrow, we'll be in the Chicago office. We'll be unreachable. By the time anyone realizes the package never left, it will be Friday morning. It will be too late, and it will be entirely her fault." They left the office, partners in crime. Back in the darkness, the green light on Clara's computer terminal blinked off, but across the hall, a small red light on a ceiling-mounted security camera, the one Julian always assumed was just for show, remained on. It had captured Serafina's 5:35 p.m. visit to the mailroom. It had captured her logging into Clara's computer. It had captured everything. Friday morning was electric with panic. The first call came at 9 a.m., London time, which was 4 a.m. in New York. Julian, asleep in his high-rise apartment, ignored it. The second came at 5 a.m. from his boss, David Morrison. Julian answered that one. "Vance, where in God's name is the North Star package?" Morrison bellowed, his voice cracking with transatlantic static. "Our London team is sitting here with the board, and the documents are not here. The 10 a.m. deadline is in 1 hour. Julian feigned groggy confusion. "What? That's impossible." Clara confirmed it was sent. "Well, it wasn't," Morrison roared. "You fix this, Vance. You fix this now, or your partnership is dead." The line clicked. Julian was wide awake. He frantically called the office. Clara, who always arrived at 7 a.m., picked up. "Clara, where is the North Star package?" Julian yelled, genuine panic now mixing with his manufactured rage. It's... What? Clara's voice was instantly alert. Julian, it's in London. I sent it Wednesday for Thursday pickup. It's not in London. The courier company has no record of a pickup. Did you log it? Yes, of course I logged it. I emailed you the confirmation. Clara was typing furiously. Julian, the email. It's gone. The scheduler appointment. It's not here. What do you mean it's not there? Julian spat. Did you forget? Clara, did you forget to send the most important package of my career? No, Clara was stunned. She was searching her desk, her mind racing. I don't understand. I know Find it, Clara. Find it, or you are finished. Julian hung up. He showered, shaved, and dressed with methodical care. He put on his most expensive suit. Today was a day for an execution. He arrived at the office at 9 a.m. sharp. The floor was a morgue. Everyone knew. The North Star deal was dead. The firm would face millions in penalties, but worse, the reputational damage was catastrophic. Clara was pale, standing by her desk, her hands resting on her stomach. She looked defeated. My office, Clara. Now, Julian said, his voice devoid of all warmth. Serafina was already inside, sitting in the guest chair, examining her nails. She looked up as Clara entered, a mask of false sympathy on her face. Clara, I'm so sorry. This is just a tragedy. Julian, I don't know what happened, Clara began, her voice shaking but firm. I took that package to the mailroom myself. I logged it. I emailed you. Someone. Julian cut her off, his voice dangerously low. Or something? Like pregnancy brain, Clara? Is that the something? Clara recoiled as if struck. How dare you? I dare, Julian said, stepping closer. Because I trusted you. I looked like a fool this morning. This firm is now exposed to litigation and ruin, all because my mind-reader secretary was too busy picking out nursery colors to do her one simple job. That is not true, Clara said, her voice rising. I have never missed a deadline. I have never failed you. This is a mistake. This is wrong. It's a failure, Clara. A catastrophic failure, Julian said. He leaned on his desk, the picture of a disappointed, betrayed leader. Serafina was the one who found the package. Go on, Sarah. Tell her. Serafina looked up, her eyes wide with mock sadness. Clara, I found it this morning, in your desk drawer, under a pile of baby magazines. This was a lie too far, a vicious, unnecessary embellishment. What? Clara whispered. She physically staggered back. No, I would never. Someone put it there. Who, Clara? Julian laughed, a cold, barking sound. The mailroom gnome? Serafina? Me? Do you hear how paranoid you sound? You're hormonal, you're forgetful, and you just cost this company its biggest deal of the decade. He circled his desk and stood over her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. I can't have unreliable people on my team, he said. The partnership is expanding. We're moving into Asia. I need sharks. Clara, not... This. He gestured vaguely at her stomach. Clara's eyes, which had been wide with shock, suddenly narrowed. The fear vanished, replaced by that same cold, calculating calm Mary had seen before. Julian, she said, her voice quiet. You are making a terrible mistake. No, he said. My mistake was not doing this months ago. You're fired, Clara, effective immediately. Julian, you can't, Serafina said, playing her part. I can and I am, Julian snapped. Performance. Gross negligence. I have more than cause. Security is on their way up. The entire office was watching through the glass walls. They could hear the raised voices. Mary had her hand over her mouth. "You're firing me," Clara stated, not a question. "Because of a package you know I sent. You're firing me, 6 months pregnant, to give my desk to your mistress." The air left the room. Julian's face went from angry to purple. Serafina shot to her feet. "How dare you!" Serafina shrieked. "Shut up, Serafina," Clara said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. She never broke eye contact with Julian. "You will regret this, Julian Vance. You will regret this more than any other decision in your short, pathetic life." "Get her out," Julian choked out, pressing the security button on his phone. 2 uniformed guards arrived. "Mr. Vance, Ms. Hayes is no longer an employee. Please escort her from the building." The guards looked uncomfortable. Escorting a visibly pregnant woman out was a new low. "Ma'am, if you'll come with us." Clara didn't look at them. She looked only at Julian. She let the silence stretch, imprinting his furious, triumphant face into her memory. Then she turned, with all the dignity she could muster, and walked out of the glass office. The guards followed. Someone had already brought a cardboard box to her desk. She didn't have much. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a small plant. Mary rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't." "It's all right, Mary," Clara said, her voice soft now. "It's not your fault." She placed her few items in the box. As she did, her sleeve rode up, revealing a simple, elegant watch. It wasn't a Rolex or a Patek. It was a vintage Cartier, understated, but worth more than Julian's entire collection. No one noticed. She picked up the box. The entire floor was silent, watching her walk of shame to the elevators. Serafina was standing in the doorway of Julian's office, a triumphant smirk on her face. Clara passed her and paused. "You know," Clara whispered, just for Serafina. "The camera in the 50th floor hallway. It has a surprisingly clear view of the mailroom. You should really fix your hair before you commit a felony next time." Serafina's face turned to chalk. Clara smiled just once and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. She stepped inside, box in hand, and as the door slid shut, she allowed herself one single shaky breath. Then she pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She hit a number on her speed dial. "Dad," she said, as the elevator began its descent. "It's done. He did it. He fired me." A deep, kind voice rumbled on the other end. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Dad. But Vanguard Equity is not. The rot is worse than we thought." "I'll be there in an hour," the voice said. "It's time I came out of retirement." Clara didn't live in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment. She lived in a sprawling, 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side, a fortress of old money and quiet elegance. The doorman, a kind man named Patrick, who had known her since she was a girl, rushed to take her box. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his face creased with worry. "You're home early. Is everything all right?" "Everything is precisely as it should be, Patrick," Clara said, managing a smile. "Is my father here?" "Mr. Hayes is in the library, Mum. He's been waiting for you." She walked past the soaring ceilings and the original Rothko paintings in the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. She entered the library, a room panelled in dark mahogany and smelling of old books and leather. Harrison Hayes stood by the window, looking out over the private garden. He was a man in his late 60s, but he radiated an energy that shamed men half his age. He wasn't tall, but he was broad, with a full head of white hair and eyes so blue they seemed to bore through steel. This was the man who had built Vanguard Equity Partners from nothing, a legendary, almost mythical figure on Wall Street. The press called him the Architect. For the last 5 years he had been happily retired, leaving the day-to-day to his hand-picked successor, David Morrison. He turned as she entered. "Clara." He enveloped her in a hug, his hand going to her belly. "And how is my grandchild?" "He's kicking," Clara smiled, leaning into him. "He's as indignant as I am." "He has my blood, after all," Harrison chuckled. He led her to a deep leather armchair and poured her a glass of water. "Tell me everything. From the top." Clara recounted the entire sordid affair. The Henderson call, the missed package, the lies, Serafina, the public humiliation. Harrison listened, his face impassive. He was a man who listened for a living, and his stillness was more terrifying than any rage. "He used the phrase, 'pregnancy brain'?" Harrison asked, his voice soft. "He did, and then he gestured to my stomach and said, 'I need sharks, not this.'" Harrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the blue had turned to ice. "Julian Vance, I remember him. Wharton, same as you. Top of his class. I thought he was hungry. I didn't realize he was depraved." This had all been Clara's idea. A year ago, she had been a rising star at a rival firm, already a junior partner. But she'd been hearing things about her father's company. Rumors, whispers of a toxic Shark Tank culture that had taken root since his retirement. Talk of bullying, of shady accounting, of good people being pushed out. "It's my legacy, Dad," she had told him. "It's our name on the building. I won't let it be rotted from the inside." She'd had one condition. She would go in with her mother's maiden name, Hayes. No one would know who she was. She'd start as a floater, learn the systems, and find the source of the rot. Her father had argued, but she was as stubborn as he was. Her credentials were so good, she was placed as Julian Vance's secretary within a month. His reputation as a difficult manager was legendary, and no one else would take the job. "I thought he was just an arrogant bully, Dad," Clara said, sipping her water. "But this is criminal. Serafina Croft and he, they're stealing." "Stealing?" Harrison sat up. "You have proof?" "More than proof," Clara said. She walked to the desk and pulled out a slim, encrypted flash drive. "Julian thought I was reading baby magazines. I was running forensic accounting on his discretionary marketing funds, the ones he directs to Serafina." She plugged the drive into a laptop. "Serafina isn't just his mistress. She's his launderer. 3 months ago, she incorporated a shell company, Croft Media Solutions. Since then, Julian has approved over $4 million in consulting fees to this company. The invoices are for market synergy analysis and brand strategy. They're boilerplate nonsense." She pulled up another file. "Here are the bank transfers from Croft Media Solutions to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account held by a holding company. And guess who the sole director of that holding company is?" "Julian Vance," Harrison finished, his voice grim. "He wasn't firing me because I'm pregnant," Clara said, the pieces clicking into place. "He was firing me because I was there. I was the one who processed his expense reports. I was the one who saw the invoices. He and Serafina, they thought I was just a dumb, pregnant secretary. They got sloppy. They were afraid I was getting too close." "The North Star package," Harrison said. "It wasn't just to get you fired. It was a distraction, a big, messy, public execution to draw everyone's attention away from the real crime." "Exactly. And they used my pregnancy as the perfect, believable excuse for my incompetence." Harrison stood and walked back to the window. The silence in the room was heavy. David Morrison, Harrison finally said. He's a good man, but he's blind. He wants to see the best in people. He let this happen. What do we do now? Clara asked. Harrison turned. The kindness was gone from his face, replaced by the cool, lethal focus of the architect. Now? Now we remind them whose name is on the building. He picked up his phone. Robert, get the jet ready. We're going to the office. And call an emergency meeting of the entire board of directors. Tell them, Harrison Hayes is back. He looked at his daughter, a fierce pride in his eyes. And Clara, it's time for you to change out of your secretary's uniform. You're going to need your Wharton suit for this. Julian Vance felt like a king. He had slept the sleep of the victorious. The North Star deal was a disaster, yes, but he had already spun it. He had spent all of Friday afternoon in crisis meetings with David Morrison, the CEO. David, I am shattered, Julian had said, a masterpiece of feigned grief. I trusted her. I think I was too sensitive to her condition. I didn't want to add to her stress, so I wasn't as vigilant. I blame myself. Morrison, a man who valued empathy, had bought it. It's a terrible lapse, Julian, but you're right. The timing, it's a mess. Don't worry. Our lawyers will handle the fallout. You just focus on the partnership. We need your leadership. The partnership. It was still his. He had cut the liability, and he was being rewarded for it. Now it was Monday morning. He walked into the lobby of the Vanguard Tower, his $3,000 leather shoes clicking on the granite. He nodded curtly to the security guard, his mind on Serafina, who was already upstairs. She had officially moved her things to Clara's old desk, right outside his glass cube. Everything was in its right place. The elevator was packed with junior analysts, all of whom went silent when he stepped in. He was a god to them. Terrifying, but a god. When he stepped out onto the 50th floor, however, the atmosphere was wrong. It wasn't the usual Monday morning hustle. It was silent, tense. Mary, the older assistant, was at her desk, her eyes red. When she saw Julian, she gave him a look of such pure, unadulterated contempt that it actually made him pause. "Good morning, Mary," he said. Mary just turned back to her screen. He shrugged it off. He walked toward his office. Serafina was not at her new desk. Strange. Then he saw it. An email flagged, urgent mandatory, had arrived at 8:01 a.m. Subject, Emergency Board and Senior Partner Meeting, 9 UAS a.m. Location, the Founders Boardroom, 52nd floor. Attendance, mandatory, no exceptions. Julian's heart gave a little thrill. This was it. The North Star fallout was over, and this was his promotion. They were gathering the partners to announce him. They were probably fast-tracking it to show the firm was stable, moving forward. He checked his reflection in the glass, straightened his Brioni tie. He was ready. He took the private executive elevator to the 52nd floor. This floor was for board meetings only. It was quiet, opulent, and smelled of old money and furniture polish. He pushed open the massive oak double doors to the founder's boardroom and stopped dead. The room was full. The entire executive board, all 12 members, were seated. David Morrison, the CEO, was there, looking pale and nervous, not at the head of the table but on the side. At the head of the table, in the high-backed chair that had sat empty for 5 years, was Harrison Hayes. Julian's blood turned to ice water. He had never met Harrison Hayes. He had only seen the oil portrait of him in the lobby. The man in the portrait was smiling. The man at the table was not. "Mr. Vance," Harrison said, his voice quiet but echoing in the cavernous room. "You're late. Take a seat." Julian's legs felt like lead. He fumbled into the only empty chair. It was at the far end of the table, opposite Harrison. He felt like he was being judged from a mile away. "Where is Serafina Croft?" Julian managed to ask. "Ms. Croft is indisposed," Harrison said. "She's with our head of security and our internal audit team. It seems there are some irregularities in her marketing budget. But we'll get to that." Julian's mouth went dry. This was not a promotion. "I have been retired for 5 years," Harrison began, his eyes sweeping the table, landing on every single board member. "I left this firm, Vanguard, in your hands. I trusted you to maintain the culture I built, a culture of integrity, of diligence, and of respect." He steepled his fingers, his icy blue gaze finally landing and staying on Julian. "Instead, I find a culture of bullying, of theft, and of staggering incompetence. Mr. Morrison, you were CEO. How did this happen?" David Morrison looked like he was going to be sick. "Harrison, I had no idea. The internal reports, Harrison cut him off, "were doctored. The profits from Mr. Vance's division, for example, have been exaggerated. His successes, it seems, were not his own." Julian gripped the arms of his chair. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know what you've been told, but my division is the most profitable in the firm. The Henderson call just last week." "Ah, yes. The Henderson call," Harrison said, a thin smile playing on his lips. "The one you brilliantly saved. A call where you miscalculated a client's exposure by 15%, and your secretary had to slide you the answer." Julian was speechless. How do you—" "I know," Harrison said, "because my head of internal review told me. You see, I've had someone on the inside for the last 8 months. Someone I trust implicitly. Someone with a Wharton MBA, a background in forensic accounting, and a vested interest in this company's good name." Harrison nodded to the double doors. "You can come in now." The doors opened. In walked Clara Hayes. She was not the Clara he knew. The mousy brown hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. The drab maternity blouses were gone, replaced by a dark navy blue Armani pantsuit, custom-tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. She wore her power as comfortably as he wore his arrogance. She looked, Julian realized with a jolt of pure terror, exactly like the man at the other end of the table. She was not carrying a box. She was carrying a leather-bound portfolio. "Clara," Julian breathed, his voice a dry rasp. The rest of the board was staring, their minds scrambling to connect the dots. "That's Ms. Hayes Donovan to you, Mr. Vance," Clara said, her voice clear and cold. She took a seat at the table, to the right of her father. "Clara Hayes Donovan, daughter of Harrison Hayes, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, the new Chief Operating Officer of Vanguard Equity Partners." David Morrison lunged forward. "Harrison, this is my daughter, David," Harrison snapped, "and she is the only person in this room who has done her job. Please, Clara, proceed." Clara opened her portfolio. "Good morning, gentlemen. For the last 8 months, I have been working as an executive assistant to Mr. Vance. My father and I were concerned about the cultural rot that was eroding this firm's foundation. We were right to be." She looked directly at Julian. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were diagnostic. "Mr. Vance," she began, "on Friday, you fired me for gross negligence, specifically for failing to courier the North Star acquisition documents." You didn't send them," Julian stammered, falling back on his lie. "You left them in your desk. Serafina found them." "No," Clara said flatly. "I did not. On Wednesday at 4:51 p.m., I personally logged the package and placed it in the mailroom's secure bin. At 5:37 p.m., she nodded to a man in the corner who dimmed the lights and turned on the large projector screen. Ms. Seraphina Croft entered the mailroom. The screen lit up with grainy, time-stamped security footage. Seraphina clear as day, distracting the clerk and stealing the red envelope. A collective gasp went around the room. At 7:14 p.m., Clara continued, as the footage changed. Ms. Croft and Mr. Vance are seen entering his office. At 7:19 p.m., Ms. Croft is seen logging into my terminal, using my credentials. She proceeds to delete my confirmation email and the courier appointment. The video was silent, but the implications were deafening. Julian was white. And at 7:21 p.m., Clara said, her voice dropping, Mr. Vance is seen taking the North Star package and placing it inside my desk drawer. The video showed him do it. The board turned as one to stare at him. You, Julian sputtered. You set me up. No, Julian, Clara said. You set yourself up. I was just the secretary. I was just the hormonal, forgetful, pregnant woman. You never, ever thought I'd be a threat. You never thought I mattered. You were so blinded by your own arrogance and your affair that you committed mail fraud and conspiracy right in front of a security camera. But why? David Morrison asked, his face ashen. Why would you, Julian? Sabotage a $2 billion deal, just to fire a secretary? That, Harrison Hayes said, is the billion-dollar question. Clara looked back at Julian. The look of a cold, satisfied predator was gone from his face. Now it was just the pathetic, sweaty fear of a man trapped. He didn't fire me because he thought I was incompetent, Clara said to the board. He fired me because he was terrified I was competent. She clicked to the next slide. It was a complex flowchart of bank accounts. Julian Vance and Seraphina Croft were not just having an affair, Clara announced. They were embezzling. For the last 3 months, Mr. Vance has been approving ghost invoices from a shell marketing company. That company, Croft Media Solutions, was founded by and is solely owned by Ms. Croft. In 90 days, they have siphoned $4.2 million from this firm. She pointed to a line item. This $4.2 million was then wired to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, a holding company named J. Vance Capital. Ring any bells, Julian? Julian Vance made a sound, a low, strangled noise. I processed those invoices, Clara said. I saw the signatures. You got sloppy, Julian. You thought I was too stupid or too distracted by my condition to notice that you were approving multi-million-dollar invoices on a Friday afternoon without a single line of due diligence. You fired me to stop me from talking. You fabricated the North Star crisis to make my firing so spectacular, so public, that no one would ever believe a word I said. I would just be the crazy, pregnant secretary who cost us all. She stood up, slowly, and walked around the table until she was standing directly behind him. He was frozen, staring at the screen that showed his financial ruin. You didn't fire me for your mistress, Julian, she whispered, so only he and the man next to him could hear. You fired me for your greed. You just used my pregnancy as your excuse. You gestured to my child, my son, and called him a liability. You called me this. She moved back to her seat. Mr. Vance, you are a thief. You are a conspirator. And worst of all, you are a fool. The heavy oak doors of the founder's boardroom shut with a final, damning click. The silence that fell was heavier than the wood. Harrison Hayes's words, report, still hung in the air, a guillotine that had just dropped. Julian Vance, a man who had lived his entire life on a diet of adrenaline and other people's fear, was now a statue of pure, waxy terror. The two detectives, businesslike and unimpressed by the bespoke suit and the 52nd floor view, moved to his chair. "Mr. Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement," the taller detective said, his voice a monotone that cut through Julian's paralysis. "Please stand and place your hands behind your back." Julian finally broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a crumble. "No," he whimpered, a sound so pathetic it made the board members physically recoil. "No, wait, you don't understand. It was her. It was Serafina. She seduced me. She set this all up. She planted the files. It was her idea." Clara, who had remained standing, let out a sound of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Pathetic," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Even now, even with the cuffs literally on their way to your wrists, you cannot take responsibility for a single one of your actions. You blame the woman you were sleeping with. You blame the woman you fired. You are a black hole of a man, Julian. Nothing is ever your fault." As the cold steel clicked shut around his wrists, Julian's terror-fueled denial finally cracked, revealing the raw, venomous hatred beneath. He surged to his feet, a snarling, cornered animal. "You!" he spat at Clara, his face purple. "A secretary. You set me up. This was all you." "I did my job, Julian," Clara said, her voice impossibly calm. "The one I was hired for, the one you paid me for. You just never bothered to ask what it was. You thought I was there to fetch your coffee. I was there to protect my family's name." Marcus Thorne, a senior partner and Julian's primary ally on the board, finally found his voice. "Harrison, this is madness," he sputtered, standing up. "Arresting a senior VP in the boardroom? The PR fallout. This is precipitous. We need to handle this internally." Harrison Hayes didn't even turn his head. "Sit down, Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're embarrassed because you backed the wrong horse. You're part of the internal problem I'm handling." He nodded to the detectives. "Get him out of my sight." The detectives began to pull Julian toward the door. As he passed Clara, he lunged, his cuffed hands straining. "You'll run this company into the ground, you sentimental bitch. This place needs sharks, and you're just weak." Clara didn't flinch. She stood her ground, forcing the detectives to yank him back. She looked him dead in the eye, her gaze a surgeon's scalpel. "My sentiment, Julian, is the one variable your arrogant mind never accounted for. My sentiment is for the 4,000 employees whose futures you gambled with. My sentiment is for the name my father built. You only accounted for your wallet. Enjoy your new accommodations. I hear the views are terrible." His shriek of rage was cut off as the doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. Harrison Hayes let the silence stretch for a beat before he spoke. "As for Ms. Croft," he said, "she is in a conference room on the 40th floor with our audit team and her own lawyer. Faced with the video evidence, she has already provided a full confession, attempting, like Mr. Vance, to pin the entire scheme on him. It won't work. She will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He then turned his gaze, which had lost none of its icy fire, on the remaining men. "And now, to the board." His eyes landed on David Morrison. The CEO looked 60 seconds from a heart attack. "David," Harrison said, and the use of his first name was a judgment in itself. "You are a good man. You are a kind man. You are not a leader. You let this infection fester in my company because you were too afraid to ask hard questions. You valued stability over integrity, and in doing so, you nearly cost us both." Morrison stood, his hands shaking. "Harrison, I am so sorry. Clara, Ms. Hayes Donovan, I had no idea. I am terribly, terribly sorry for what he did to you." Clara cut him off, not with malice, but with precision. "David, Your job wasn't to have an idea. It was to know. You were the custodian of this firm, and you let the wolves into the nursery. Your apology is noted. Your resignation is accepted. You will leave with your full pension, but you will sign an NDA that ensures you never speak the name Vanguard again." Morrison nodded, utterly broken, and walked out of the room. "Marcus," Harrison said, turning to the last dissenter, "you backed him. You championed his shark mentality. You're out. Clean your desk." "You can't do this," Marcus blustered. "I can," Harrison said. "This entire board is dissolved, effective immediately. It will be reconstituted under the new COO's direction by the end of the day. You can leave on your own, or you can follow Mr. Vance in cuffs for aiding and abetting. Your choice." Marcus Thorne, his face pale, fled the room. Finally they were alone. Just Harrison and Clara in the vast, silent boardroom. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Harrison let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 years. "Well, Madam Coe," he said, a weary pride in his voice, "your first day has been eventful." Clara walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city 52 floors below. The same view Julian had prized. "He wasn't the only rot, Dad," she said quietly. "He was just the loudest. The culture here, it's broken. It's what you always taught me not to be." Harrison came to stand beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice thick with a rare emotion. "I let it get away from me. I was so busy building the machine, I forgot about the people inside it. I was so afraid of being done, of being irrelevant in retirement. I let profit become a substitute for purpose." He turned to her, his blue eyes searching hers. "That's why you are the new COO, not me. I'm going back into retirement, for real this time. This is your firm now, Clara. Fix it." Clara put her hand over his, her other hand resting on her belly. "I'm scared, Dad. It's so broken. And with the baby." "Your pregnancy isn't a liability, Clara," he said fiercely, echoing her earlier words. "It's a perspective. It's your greatest asset. You're not just building for the next quarter. You're building for the next generation. That's what I lost. That's what you'll bring back. Now, shall we go reintroduce you to your new team?" They walked together to the 50th floor. The atmosphere was a funeral. The entire floor was frozen, watching them. They saw Julian's glass cube, now empty. They saw security guards boxing up Seraphina's things from Clara's old desk. Clara walked to the center of the floor. Everyone stared, whispering. "Mary," Clara called out. Mary at her desk looked up, her eyes wide with terror. She thought she was next. She slowly approached. "Clara, Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hayes Donovan." Clara smiled, a real, warm smile. "Mary, for 8 months, you were the only person on this floor who showed me genuine kindness. You have more integrity in your fingernail than Mr. Vance had in his entire body. You are my new executive administrator. Your title and your pay will reflect your seniority and your value. We start now." Mary's hands flew to her mouth, and she burst into tears of sheer, unadulterated relief. It was the first crack in the ice. That afternoon, Clara held an all-hands town hall in the firm's main atrium. She stood in front of 500 employees, her father standing off to the side, a proud observer. She used no microphone. Her voice, trained in Wharton lecture halls, carried. "My name is Clara Hayes Donovan," she began. "My father, Harrison Hayes, built this firm. For the last 8 months, you knew me as Clara Hayes. On Friday, many of you watched me get fired, humiliated, and escorted from this building. This morning, you watched Mr. Vance get arrested. A nervous murmur went through the crowd. "The era of Vanguard as a shark tank is over," she declared. "Sharks are lazy, solitary predators. They eat their own. From today, we will be a wolf pack. We are intelligent, we are strategic, we are collaborative, and we protect our own. This will be a place of integrity first. Profit second, because integrity, in the long run, is profit." She laid out her new vision. "The rot stops today. I am firing every manager in this firm with a credible HR complaint of bullying or harassment. Their positions will be filled from within. And my first act as COO," she paused, her hand going to her stomach, "is to announce the new Vanguard parental leave policy. 6 months, fully paid, for all employees, mothers, fathers, and adoptive parents, because family is not a liability. It is our foundation." A stunned silence. Then, led by Mary, a slow, building wave of applause that became a roar. The next 6 months were a war. The sharks she fired didn't go quietly. Marcus Thorne's allies tried to sue for wrongful termination. Clara countered, in person, with the meticulous evidence of their complicity and incompetence she had gathered as a secretary. Forbes magazine ran a scathing article titled, "The Heiress's Hobby: Can a Pregnant Idealist Run a Wall Street Firm?" Clara's response was to write a fiery op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, titled, "Yes, she can, and she's doing it." It went viral. She was vilified on financial TV as sentimental and naive, then praised by a new generation as a visionary. The firm's best and brightest, who had been suffocating under the old guard, flocked to her. Profits dipped for 1 quarter, then soared, driven by a new, massive, green energy fund she had personally championed. The legal reckoning was absolute. Serafina Croft, faced with the video and her own paper trail, folded completely. She testified against Julian, detailing his greed and his paranoia. She received 2 years in a low-security federal prison. Julian, blinded by his own narcissism, made the fatal mistake of refusing a plea deal. He was convinced he could charm a jury. The trial was a circus. He painted himself as a visionary, betrayed by a spurned lover and a conniving secretary. But the prosecution had Clara's meticulous notes, the high-definition security footage, and the bank transfers. The jury convicted him on all counts in under 45 minutes. At his sentencing, the judge, a woman in her 60s, looked down at him with contempt. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you are a man of profound arrogance and a complete lack of character. Your crimes were not of passion, but of a cold, calculated greed. But what the court finds most appalling is your cruel and unusual humiliation of an employee in a vulnerable condition. You used a woman's pregnancy as a weapon. You are, in short, a bully. You are sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary." He screamed, a high, thin sound of disbelief as he was led away. 8 months after the boardroom coup, the 50th floor was unrecognizable. It was bright. The glass cube of Julian's office had been dismantled, replaced by a large, open-plan collaborative workspace. People were talking, laughing, arguing over whiteboards. Clara sat in her new office, a warmer space with comfortable chairs, on the same floor as her team. She was on a conference call, finalizing the acquisition of a tech startup. Her desk was covered in reports, but also a small, silver-framed sonogram. She was in mid-sentence when she stopped, her breath catching. She smiled, a small, tired but triumphant smile. Mary, now her unflappable chief of staff, noticed immediately. "Ms. Hayes." "Is it?" "It is," Clara breathed, closing her laptop. "Call my husband, and tell the Tokyo board. The call will have to be rescheduled for tomorrow morning. My son has decided on an earlier than expected arrival." Harrison Hayes met her at the elevator, holding a brand new baby carrier, beaming. "Ready, Madam Coe?" "More than ready, Dad," she said, squeezing his arm. As the elevator doors closed, the floor didn't panic. They didn't whisper. They stood, and they applauded their leader. Clara Hayes Donovan had built a company that could run without her for a few hours, or a few months. The new foundation was strong. It wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. What a story of karma and consequences. It just goes to show that you never, ever know who you're talking to. Julian's arrogance and cruelty weren't just his moral failing. They were his financial ruin. He saw a pregnant secretary as a weak, disposable problem, but he was actually abusing the most powerful person in the building. Clara proved that true strength isn't about yelling, bullying, or wearing an expensive suit. It's about intelligence, patience, and knowing exactly when to make your move. She didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt an entire company in her own, stronger image. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Was it satisfying? Let me know in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. If you loved this story, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another real-life drama. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.